she's like you said earlier, she's a femme fatale.
You could say they broke up because of artistic differences. He saw himself as alive, and she saw him dead. He had it coming.
You can't. You have to contractually, in the Mortified contract that we both signed, you have to warn me before you sing Chicago. You're in violation of our agreement. Welcome to Mortified, the Friendship Quest, a podcast where two long-distance friends bounce media recommendations, all in hopes the other will like it. I'm Aaron.
And I'm hiding out with some sweet thing in Tijuana.
And this week, we're watching the 1997 neo-noir classic Cowboy Bebop. Before we cash this episode in for 50,000 woolongs, remember you can help us on Mortified the Legitimacy Quest by subscribing to us on YouTube, iTunes, or Spotify, signing up for our monthly newsletter through the link in our show notes, or following us on Twitter and Tumblr at MortifiedPod. Leyla.
Aaron.
So we watched Cowboy Bebop.
That we did.
This is a show that I feel like is like on par with, Akira and Evangelion and, classics of the anime genre. And that's why I was so excited to watch it with you for this episode, because like it's just one of those things that like I figure like I should just go ahead and watch. And I'm really excited to talk about it. But I'm wondering, when was the first time you ever watched Cowboy Bebop?
Okay, I can't remember. Oh, first of all, it always aired on Toonami back when Adult Swim back when I used to watch Adult Swim past my bedtime.
Okay, I could never get away with that. My parents wouldn't let me.
I mean, listen. Were there times my mom walked in and the TV was still glowing bright CRT green? You bet. But yeah, so it aired then. I watched a couple episodes. I didn't get what the hype was when I was, like 8. I was like, whatever, I'm going to go back to watching Kagome and Inuyasha scream each other's names for 30 minutes. And then I did watch it a couple of years ago. I can't remember specifically when, but I did get into it. I was like, same thing as you. I should watch it. And I found it quite boring, which is odd because this go I was enthralled.
Interesting.
Yes. Why? So like aside from a sense of obligation, I guess why did you feel like this is something you wanted to watch, and like what were you expecting?
So yeah, I listen to a lot of anime podcasts, and like people talk about Cowboy Bebop constantly when they're referencing, sci-fi and this kind of like early or late 90s, early 2000s, like, we did a whole Toonami segment last year, and like this was, one of the big things, like you said, like anime that was like, oh, cool and adult, and like trying to introduce young Americans to the genre. And like, it just comes up in conversation so much, like, like a lot of, I'm doing this mentorship program, and my mentor, he cites Cowboy Bebop as one of the touchstones, and like especially for people who are in that like East Asian, Southeast Asian like milieu. This show has a lot of like Southeast Asian, East Asian touchstones. Like Singapore features prominently in one episode, and like that is another reason why I was very interested in it. And I mean, just like at a certain point, something saturates culture in such a way that's like, okay, I gotta figure out what's going on here. And so I am, glad that we went ahead and watched it, because like now I get it, and I can see like why people were so excited about it.
Were you expecting like a specific experience, especially in comparison to the other classics we've watched, which like as we've enumerated before we started recording, we watched what we consider classics, like obviously Akira. We watched Evangelion, not for this podcast, but we have watched it, and Dragon Ball Z at this point, Naruto, Yu Yu Hakusho. We consider those like touchstone classic animes of varying genres. So was there anything like, was there a certain expectation, I guess, when you were going in?
I mean, like, I expect it to be like kind of like a cool, like have that like late 90s style of animation, and like, follow the story of like a guy. I mean, I knew roughly who Spike Spiegel was as like a character who's like, he's not afraid of death and he's like a cool kung fu guy. What I didn't expect, and I think this is gonna color a lot of this episode, is that like this show does not have like a consistent like story, right? Like we talked about in our One Piece episode, right? A lot of animes go on for fucking ever, and they are following a single story. Maybe that story has different arcs, maybe that story has different characters, but they are also sort of driving towards one thing, right? To reference, Dragon Ball, Goku's always trying to defeat a bad guy and collect the Dragon Balls, or Naruto's always trying to become Hokage, etc., etc. Cowboy Bebop is very episodic. There's not really like a specific goal. The crew of the Bebop is generally just trying to, cash in their bounties, trying to find the bad guys. There are maybe like 5 or 6 episodes that really have a continuity and a plot that affects the characters' motivations and where they're going, and how they feel about themselves and each other. And I think that's interesting. I think it overall, like, I was kind of expecting more of a linear narrative, which did kind of affect my enjoyment of it. But yeah, I think it's a very interesting show, and I think it's very interesting that a show without like a very strong unified story got so popular.
Yeah, I think that's funny that you bring that up, because even having seen it, like, this is my 3rd time now, at least in part, I could never remember the story, and it's because there, like, genuinely isn't one. Well, there is, but you gotta find it. You gotta dig for it a little bit.
And I'm wondering if that's just a byproduct of the fact that, like, I don't know how it was distributed in Japan, but in the United States, like you said, it was on Adult Swim. It was just like kind of one of those things where it's just like, okay, well, we're just going to throw a bunch of episodes on, like from the hours of 12 to 3 a.m. And it's just like whatever shows up, shows up. But like, yeah, I don't know. I think it's a very interesting choice to make a series of episodes that are not about a singular story. And the fact that like I'm so baffled by this kind of shows how a lot of the media that we consume and produce, frankly, all does tend to follow like a linear story. And I think there's something to be said about like playing with your medium and the way that you deliver a story, or not even a story, but it's like a general like world, like the way that you try to make people experience an idea in your head doesn't always have to be through a singular story. And I think it's good that they're trying this like Monster of the Week style delivery. But yeah, it's a weird choice, but I am glad that they tried something different. I'm speaking about Cowboy Bebop if it's not like one of the most wildly successful animes on the planet, but that's just how I feel.
Yeah, it's, I mean, should we just get into it? Okay, so, as you mentioned, a lot of Cowboy Bebop, it's only 26 episodes, is a Monster of the Week setup. So, like, you have a bounty, delivered through my favorite mechanism, which is this TV show called Big Shot, with these 2 people cosplaying cowboys and delivering, like, news on bounties. They get a bounty. They go for the bounty. Most of the time, they do not get the bounty, and have to kind of, like, keep going to other bounties. I think the charm of these segments is that you get to see this, like, domestic life develop between these 4 bounty hunters, which is Spike Spiegel, who's our main character, Jet Black, Faye Valentine, and Ed, and their accidental Welsh corgi adoption, Ein. And you get to kind of see, like, Jet cooking for the crew, Faye kind of disrupting the whole flow of things because she's very, like, high maintenance, and Ed is just a little chaos element. And there's in the beginning of one episode, and later in the series, Jet is, like, walking through the ship, and the gravity's, like, kind of negotiable, so he's walking because he's heavier, but Ed is floating behind him and is just holding onto his shoulders while Jet is debriefing her. And it's, like, those are the moments that I really thrived for in the kind of Monster of the Week segments. But the story that exists has to do with Spike's time in something called the Syndicate, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's like a mob structure. And his old ex-partner, I guess, Vicious, who betrayed him, and his old girlfriend, Julia, who also kind of betrayed him. I guess. She just, like, wouldn't leave with him. Or she couldn't. And it centers around kind of Spike both avoiding and also being extremely reactive to that old hurt. So yeah, a lot of this show is monster of the week, slice of life, noir, and so much of it lives in the past. So it's interesting. It's a tonal piece, I would call it. Very much a tonal piece. But yeah, do we want to get in the characters? How did you feel about our boy Spike?
You know, I'm very glad I got to meet Spike. I think that, you know, Spike is iconic not only because of, you know, the fact that he's the lead of Cowboy Bebop, but especially because of his hair. I love that he has the, like, football, like, Hey Arnold style hair. And it just, as somebody whose hair tends to get very poofy and long, I was like, yes, this is the representation we deserve. But, like, yeah, I mean, I think I like Spike, you know, and we'll talk about this as we talk about, you know, noir as a genre. But, like, the thing about Spike and the thing about a lot of these characters is that they don't really have arcs per se. Like, they never change. Like, I don't think Spike's opinions or outlook on the world changes from the beginning of the show to the end of the show. And I think like that's kind of the point. That is what he exists for in the genre, is just to be kind of like a down on his luck, like a bounty hunter who is, you know, he's got a heart of gold, but he's also kind of a tough guy who'll, you know, 99% of the fights, I mean, not 99, 80% of the fights, he like just owns these dudes with his cool kung fu and great shooting. You know, he's like a pretty, you know, this is common for a lot of anime protagonists. He's like a cool, tough guy that, you know, can take some licks, but in the end of the day, you know, he's doing the right thing. Except, you know, in this one, he's not as much happy-go-lucky as he is just like, well, that's the way it goes sometimes. Light cigarette.
Yeah, the cigarettes are... I did start jonesing for a smoke. Yeah, it truly, it did not... as a former smoker, I have quit. It did make me crave a cigarette. But, yeah, I really like... I think you point out an interesting thing in the fact that, like, we don't see them experience their arcs. We kind of get all or most of them post-arc. Like, the arc has happened, and it happens in the flashbacks that we get. Or at least, like, for Spike, it's the resolution of his arc that we get in flashbacks, right? Like, we never see the Spike being betrayed. We see Spike during being betrayed and after. And that's kind of where his emotional arc is. Sometimes Cowboy Bebop, and this is a problem, not a problem. This is just a thing, not with just Spike, but with kind of all the characters. There are moments where anyone in Cowboy Bebop is like poignant and melancholic, and then there's moments where they're just like a little too much for me. And I think Spike as the protagonist does fall into like generally melancholic, and like, you know, you watch him stare out of the window a lot. He saves the puppies, he saves the children, even though he says he hates them, and you know, he's a rogue with a heart of gold kind of thing. Not wholly, he, you know, he'll go after the bounty. It doesn't matter who it is. But, you know, there are moments where, like, it's a little heavy-handed for me. But that's the thing with everyone. But yeah, I like Spike a lot, too. He's really... I like his relationship with Jet a lot. They're really great friends. And, yeah, I definitely want to talk about the way they interact a little bit more. Which, I mean, hey, Jet Black, former cop, big dude, prosthetic arm. I think what this show does successfully with his character is it avoids a lot of tropes. So, like, yes, Jet takes care of the cooking and stuff, but it never feels paternal, even though he's a little older than Spike and technically Faye. But I do love seeing him in an apron making bell peppers and beef.
Bell
That's
peppers
really
and beef
good.
is my favorite bit in the show. It's very much so like the show opens with him being like, "What are we having for dinner?" And Jet's like, "Bell peppers and beef." And then Spike looks at the plate later on. And he's like, "Hey Jet, I see the bell peppers. The thing about bell peppers and beef, though, is that it does have to have beef, and this does not have beef." And Jet's just like, "Shut up and stop complaining, idiot. You're so ungrateful." And
Stop
it's a really
idiot.
good.
Your fucking repair bills are the reason we can't afford beef.
We have no money, and it's your fault. I mean, I like Jet. I think he might be my favorite character just because, like, he is kind of like a dad-ish figure who's always just like, "Ugh, that Spike, he's gonna get us, he's gonna get me killed one day." And, I think, Jet does have some, like, misogynistic, views that's not great. I don't love that, and we'll talk about those a little bit, but, I think overall Jet is kind of a character who is, like, generally heartwarming and wants to do the right thing. But ultimately, like all the other characters, is stuck in the past, and is just sort of trying to make his way. But yeah, I think some of the best moments, like in the show, that make it so endearing are the moments where they're all eating, or like they're either in the I want to say like living room of the Bebop, essentially, and like when like his former partner's daughter comes in or something, and like he's like, "Hey, this is now no longer a no smoking area because there's a child on board." And they're all like, "What? We've always smoked here." And he's like, "Well, no more." And there's a very, very good scene in one of the later episodes where he and Spike get a whole like a basket full of eggs, and the rest, like, the show closes out with him and Spike just eating these hard-boiled eggs just with no salt and pepper, just straight up chowing down. It's ridiculous.
God, yeah. God. It's like, it just, the characters feel so like lived in, like the space they occupy and the way they interact is so just like, because Spike and Jet are together for 3 years before we run into them, and like they just feel like shitty roommates.
Yes.
And it's a delight to watch. It's some of my favorite stuff.
Yes, and speaking of shitty roommates, we get the ultimate shitty roommate in Faye Valentine, who, does add a certain level of acerbic wit and snark to the characters on the Bebop, and I do appreciate her inclusion. And, I like Faye. I think Faye is a fun character who's very much just like, these men are a bunch of dolts, and I'm going to take them for all they're worth. And, I like her. I don't think we get a very much like infantilizing or soft peddling Faye's character like some other more shonen animes might. She's like a strong independent woman, quote unquote, but also like she has flaws, and like she's kind of shitty, and like frequently will just like ditch the guys and take their money, but then like we'll come back because they're ultimately like friends. So yeah, I like Faye. I think that of all the characters in this show, she has the most of an arc, because she does have amnesia, and like she sort of like over the course of the show figures out who she was.
Yeah, I mean, she's the femme fatale, right? Her and Julia both kind of share that load, where like Faye's the femme and Julia's the fatale a little more.
That's one way to put it. Spoiler alert.
The show's been out for 30 years. I think we're good.
Yeah, like, I don't care. I'm sorry if we spoiled Cowboy Bebop for you.
But, I mean, like, I would argue we kind of catch Faye at the end of her arc, too, though, because really the only thing we get from her is, like, she's done the whole, I've been betrayed, I'm on my own, I'm now gonna turn full defensive mechanisms on, until her ex-boyfriend from another life shows up, which, what a scene when he is just hoping she does not recognize him because he got fat implants, which I think is very funny. That's like a thing you can just go to a doctor and do. We really see her kind of get the beginning of her closure in that, because that seems to be one of the events that like triggers her memory coming back a little bit more after her accident.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like her. I mean, she's a wild cannon. She is very... She's got a lot of stuff going on internally. I think the part where, like, Spike goes off to... Spoiler again. Spike goes off to die. Where she just, like, doesn't know how to say goodbye, so she just, like, shoots her gun into the ceiling a bunch of times. Like, that got me for some reason. Because she's just, like, she can't. She doesn't know how to say goodbye. I think their relationship's really, really interesting. But, like, my favorite, I think, domestic scene with Faye is when she is letting Ed paint her toenails.
That's really good. Speaking of Ed is this hacker they pick up in like episode 9, I want to say. Yes, episode 9 is when Edward is introduced, which is to say a third of the way third of the way through the show, they introduce one of the most important characters. And Ed is just this very strange, like, I want to say 14-year-old, like, little girl, who, like, kind of a tomboy, but who is just, like, a computer hacker, essentially. And she has a lot of weird, like, speech mechanisms. Like, she only refers to Ed in the third person. Like, she never says I. But yeah, she's like a fun breath of fresh air that I'm really glad they introduced, like, a third of the way through. I think that character introduction stuff makes sense. You've got the 3 bounty hunters that are kind of squabbling with each other. Now they have a child.
Yeah, and the funny thing about Ed too is, like, by no means the fact that she is a kid doesn't mean that she's, like, helpless, because Faye is like, hey, I might have promised this kid that she's going to become a bounty hunter, but no, that's not going to happen. I did that to get information out of her. Let's go. And Jet tries to take off without Ed, and Ed is like, oh, fine, fuck you, and hacks the computers and brings the Bebop back down so she can board. Which we should clarify. Yeah, the ship is the Bebop.
Yeah.
Spike is the cowboy.
Yes, correct.
He does refer to himself as an old-fashioned cowboy. Yeah, so I love Ed. And then, like, we can lump Ein in here. Ein is a very expensive data dog. We never find out what that is. It is an expensive, experimental dog that they think is just your run-of-the-mill corgi that is worth 2 oolongs.
Yes, it's very funny. And at several points in time, they do threaten to eat Ein because they're so hungry. But yeah, Ein does play an important role, and you get that, like, animal, like, oh, there's an animal that can sense something going on here. Like, that's kind of cool. Like, maybe the best episode with Ein and Ed is the very strange one that...
the goop one?
Yes, episode 11, Toys in the Attic, where it's just like, Spike just left a fancy rock lobster in the fridge for a year, and, like, it turned alive and turned into an evil poisonous goop, and I think kills everybody on board the Bebop except for Ed, who just eats it. I think they recover eventually because of reasons, but then Ed at the very end just, like, swallows the goop whole, which is so weird.
Yeah, that fridge had an ecosystem happening in it. Like, when Spike opened that fridge, I was like, oh, baby, no. So, yeah, what a wild episode. Like, when we talk about Monster of the Week, like, that was a Monster of the Week. But it did spawn one of my favorite interactions between Ed and Spike, which was Ed was like, it's aliens! And Spike was sitting there and he's like, could be an organism that mutated new, which would make it aliens, I guess. just the reluctant acceptance of this, like, child's theory, because Ed's usually right? Like, yeah, Ed usually guesses right. So it's just, oh man, it was so funny just to watch them all, like, struggle through it. Like, Faye got bitten in the bath, and Jet is, like, laying there on the couch while they're going through. They're like, well, what if it's cholera? And he's, like, sweating.
What if it's Ebola?
Yeah, just really great character work, I think, with these guys. And now we talk about the minor character. Starting with, how did you feel about Vicious?
I struggled to care about Vicious. I mean, I think Vicious was just like, yeah, there's an edgy bad guy out to, kill Spike's girlfriend, and he's the, the dark shadow. He's all the darkness in Spike's heart, to quote Kingdom Hearts. He's, basically just like, I'm the evil version of Spike, and, he can never rest until I'm dead, a la Cloud and Sephiroth. But like, yeah, I mean, he takes over the Syndicate at the end, and he's the reason that Spike can't get over his past, because he's always coming back to him and doing violence to him. He's fine. He has a sword, which is cool and fun. But yeah, I mean, he was just like a kind of a boilerplate villain, I felt.
I would like to paint a word picture of Vicious, because I think it's the only thing I really need to say about him, is just to describe him. Because you're right, he is what he is. Vicious has white hair that's like just above shoulder length. Usually wears some sort of dramatic jacket, cape thing with a hat sometimes. He likes to look a little mysterious. He likes to keep his eyes obscured. He's the kind of motherfucker that just carries around a music box. And as Aaron said, he has a sword in a space opera. A space noir. No one else. No, not one other motherfucker does that. But Vicious! There is a scene where he's about to get executed, and he is in the crucifixion pose. So if we can just kind of like absorb the kind of melodrama that Vicious brings to the scene, that's pretty much what he's bringing. Yeah.
He also has a bird that like follows him around, like a big weird crow heron thing.
No, we have to talk about it. Everyone's got a fucking bird. Did you notice that?
No, how does everybody have a bird?
Okay, here, fucking the chess master had a parrot.
Okay, yes, has a weird parrot.
The fortune teller that was telling Abdul Hakim where to find the corgi, he had a bird.
Yes, okay.
Vicious had a bird.
Vicious has a bird. Jet's ex-girlfriend has a fake bird that like keeps doing the drinky thing.
Jet's ex-girlfriend, everyone in this anime has a bird. It has a fixation on birds.
There are a lot of shots of birds flying over when Spike is left for dead. He wakes up with a crow on his chest.
He asks the crow for directions, which is how you know you're down bad. You ask a crow which way is west. I thought it was very good. But with other characters that we're not sure, we'll get more into Julia later, but let's just give an overview of Julia. She's Spike's ex-girlfriend.
Yep. He's obsessed with her, can't let her go. She was, I don't know if she actually shot him in the past, but like Vicious basically made her either try to shoot him or actually shoot him. And that's why they broke up, because very few relationships I feel can survive, the arms being drawn. But like, yeah, I mean, Spike's just obsessed with her. Like whenever he hears the name Julia, he like goes immediately to that planet. Is like, Julia, where are you at? She's like you said earlier, she's a femme fatale.
You could say they broke up because of artistic differences. He saw himself as alive, and she saw him dead. He had it coming.
You can't. You have to contractually, in the Mortified contract that we both signed, you have to warn me before you sing Chicago. You're in violation of our agreement.
No, I'm so very, very sorry. You can bill me.
I will. 50,000 wulongs.
Is that all I'm worth to you?
I don't know how much a wulong is worth.
I don't either. It's never clear what a wulong can buy. Let's talk about my favorite character, Gren.
Gren is very interesting. I think of, all the side characters, Gren is definitely one of the most interesting, if not very weird. Gren apparently used to be Vicious's comrade when they were fighting the wars on the moon of Jupiter Titan, I believe. And like this is very similar to Spike and Julia, Gren just wants to confront Vicious one last time and find out why Vicious betrayed them, because apparently Vicious was a spy for the enemy. You know, we never get much backstory about, you know, what that means, like whose side is who and like the politics of that, but like, it doesn't matter. That's not really what this story is interested in. But yeah, I think, you know, Gren is a very interesting, like, very noir in that he's like a saxophone player that's, you know, he got betrayed during the war, and now he just plays sad saxophone music in a bar that is patronized only by men.
Yeah, because the planet doesn't have any women, which I thought was a wild thing to posit. It did make some of the conversations very funny, though, because, like, Spike is looking for Julia at that moment, and so, like, you know, somebody leads him to a drag queen named Julia, so that was very funny. And then, people are asking around about Faye, and they're like, are you sure it was her? And the bartender's just like, yes, it's been 6 months since I've seen a woman and 2 years since I've seen one that good looking. Like, okay, guys. All right,
bro. You need to leave this planet, sir. Y'all were way too horny.
Y'all need to go take a vacation. One of the dudes does leave because he gets his ass handed to him like 3 times.
Yeah, then he gets hit by a train, right? Yeah, worst luck.
Oh man. Gren does play a lot of sad saxophone. He refers to himself as he, so I'm gonna go with that. But he is intersex. I think that's like the closest way I could use modern terminology. Because
he's not trained. The way that they explain it is that, like, you know, he got betrayed by Vicious, and then, you know, the people who apprehended him experimented on him, and the experiments messed up his hormones. So, like, you know, it's explicitly shown that he has breasts. But, like, you know, I don't know basically anything about the trans community, but my understanding is that for it to be, you know, for you to have transitioned, it has to be intentional, like on purpose. So I think intersex is probably the right word.
Yeah, because he has both a penis and also breasts. So I think intersex is probably the closest I could get using modern terminology. If not, I mean, we welcome some education in that regard.
Sound off in the comments, but yeah.
Yeah, but whatchamacallit, he's very, like, also, like all the rest of the characters. I mean, you've kind of alluded to this, but the show is really focused on betrayal, and, like, exploring the betrayal, right? It happens with Jet and his partner, it happens with Spike and Vicious and Julia, it happens with Faye, and I forget the name of the guy she was with for a while, the medical, like, Winston or something.
Whitney Matsumoto.
Whitney! Faye and Whitney, and I think Ed is really the only one who doesn't have that.
She has a dad.
She does. She has a father person. That is correct. But, yeah, Gren is sad, and plays sad saxophone, and has long, pretty hair, and is kind. And that's really all it takes to get me, you know? He shows up I did like when he shows up to confront Vicious, and Vicious tries to give him a fucking bomb, and he's just like, nah, I know what's in this case, and he kicks it back at Vicious. I was like, yeah, baby, you protect yourself. I love this for you.
There we go.
He does die immediately after, but he says he's ill and is gonna die anyway. But yeah, I really love Gren. Even, like, between my rewatches, he's the character that kind of stuck out most to me, that I, like, remembered liking. And then the last ones we have on our list are Eliza and Rint. I don't have too much to say about these guys. Lisa is Jet's ex-girlfriend. And Rint is her new extremely anxious boyfriend. And they hang out in Lisa's bar together, and Jet comes, and basically tells her that, like, hey, I told myself that when this stopwatch stopped and you still hadn't come back, it would be over. And she's like, dude, my life went on. Like, and she points out to him that, like, you know, when I was with you, I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to think for myself. I just had to, like, follow your lead, and you were always right. And I just, like, wanted to make my own decisions. Even if that meant fucking up royally, I wanted it to be my own decision. And the thing that annoyed me was that at the end, Jet tells Rint to be a man and take care of her. Did you not just hear anything she said to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there might have been some structural issues in that relationship.
Yeah. But I think, honestly, like, that's one of the things I really like about because, like you said, right, like, there's not arcs so much, but we get, like, these impressions of these characters when we first meet them, right? So, and then the thing that the narrative does that I think is interesting is it changes the viewer's impression of the character by introducing the impressions of other characters. So, like, you have a view of Jet that is, like, again, not, like, paternal, but, like, a wizened kind of figure of experience, right? And, like,
yes,
you think, okay...
He's even-tempered as compared to Spike, who is reckless.
Absolutely. Spike's a mess. But, you know, you get this, like, okay, so you have this, like, even-tempered man who, like, knows what he's doing. He's got a lot of experience to draw on. And then you introduce Elisa and you see, okay, he was overbearing. Then you introduce his partner in later episodes and you get, okay, well, he's so blinded by justice that he's reckless. And with Spike, it's like, okay, he's reckless, but then you introduce Vicious and Julia, and you kind of get the impression of, like, oh, he's reckless and, like, kind of waiting to die because he's been set adrift by, like, these things and because he was going to run and thought it was possible to run and stuff like that. With Faye also, you know? So it's I think that's the interesting part about the way this narrative handles characters. It's like, yes, they don't get a character arc, but the narrative forces the viewer to change their opinion of the character based on other characters they introduce.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, actually. Just that way of showing little snapshots of character by putting them in contrast with other characters is a very effective technique. And, you know, looking back on it, I do think Cowboy Bebop does that well.
Yeah, kudos where kudos are due. But I think that's you know, we just talked about character arcs. I think it's a good way to segue into, like, why didn't the Julia thing work for us? Like, what was it for you?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think this is, like I was saying, my whole complaint is that, you know, I really do wish there was a more overarching narrative. And, like, the fact is that we don't really know who Julia is. Like, can you name a trait about Julia besides the fact that she was Spike's girlfriend and betrayed him? Yeah, like, there's not enough investment in that character for me to care. I mean, I care because Spike cares, but that's it. And, like, you know, she's very much a femme fatale, and we're gonna have to unpack this, but, like, she exists to fulfill the demands of the genre, right? There's, you know, it is a very classic noir story that there's, you know, a private eye, or, you know, an ex-soldier, you know, a mobster, whatever your, you know, down on his luck guy in your noir is, and he's pining after a woman that he can never really have, because of, you know, reasons, the past, fate, etc. That's just all that Julia is, you know, and I think that's probably true of most of the noir genre. I don't know that women get a whole lot of fleshing out besides the fact that they're hot and you know, men desire them for motivational reasons. And, like, yeah, I just wish we had got more, you know, like, if there was more of Cowboy Bebop, if there was more digging into what these characters' pasts were like, you know, maybe that would be it. And again, I don't know that that's really what Cowboy Bebop is going for. I'm not sure that they want us to really care about Julia beyond the fact that, like, she is the reason that Spike is the way he is.
I mean, I think they do want us to care because her dying is a 20-second slow-mo shot.
It does take a full minute for her to hit the ground. Yeah, I don't know. Endings are hard. Listen, endings are hard. They only had 26 episodes. Sometimes you just got to be like, you get it, right? You see, this is important to y'all, and you know, for us, it didn't really click. I feel like, you know, we are come from a media environment where if there is going to be a character death, it's somebody that we have a lot more built up story and character interactions with. Like, we only really ever see Julia the most important thing that they ever did for Julia was have her and Faye team up for that one bit at the end where, you know, Julia's being chased by the syndicate, and then Faye just, like, wordlessly jumps into her convertible and they take out a bunch of dudes, which is a very cool sequence. But, like, you know, we don't get much of Julia's characterization in that besides that she's just, like, kind of a cool badass.
I love that scene because it does imply that every bounty hunter that Julia runs into, she gives a cryptic hint to tell Spike Spiegel to meet her there. He'll know what I mean. Because Faye does ask her, hey, how do you know I know Spike? She does not answer. So I think Julia's just running around looking for bounty hunters and just just trying her luck, spinning the wheel, you know? Just rouletting it. The thing that...
There's a scene on the cutting room floor with Julia just like after his face, like, how do you know Spike? It just cuts to Julia's face and she's like, yes, finally, got him.
Finally. Yeah, I mean, like, the thing that I think made me care less about Julia, which I almost hate to say, is like when Faye comes back and Jet's like, what's she like? And they just like wax poetic about how ordinary she is and how it makes her beautiful.
Yes. That sucked.
That was up there with I fell in love with Sleeping Beauty for me.
There are some whack lines in this program. I think there's much more good lines than whack ones, but they say some shit, especially when it comes to gender stuff, especially when it's like, you know, she was a dame that men would kill for. She was either a devil from heaven or a demon. Wait, shit, that's the same thing. Or a devil from heaven or the opposite angel of that. An angel from hell, yes.
Yes, an angel from hell or a demon from paradise, yeah.
Fucking, yeah, like, it's too much. It's like, come on. We left that in the 40s.
Yeah, it's quite a lot. I mean, we do get that Julia's, like, nurturing. You know, she stays with Spike and kind of, like, sings to him when he's injured. And she also, like, cares for Annie as Annie is dying. And, like, it is funny, like, how gendered Cowboy Bebop is, for also how, like, borderline transgressive it can be sometimes, right? Like, you have Gren, who is intersex, asterisk. You have Ed, who is definitely not your, like, classic definition of female and, like, could definitely be interpreted as non-binary by a modern audience. Mm-hmm. There was, like, a openly gay couple that Faye assaults with a interrogation mid-coitus, which was wild. Yeah,
there's several queer characters in this, which is very interesting. Because this came out in 1997.
Well, I mean, like, I found kind of a similar thing with Dorohedoro for the fact that it started in the late 1990s. Is like there are definitely moments of, like, also written by a woman though, like definitely moments of, like, I would call it feminism, you know, like moments of, like, giving female characters an inner life, which Cowboy Bebop also does. But yeah, Julia just, like, didn't get that treatment. She did not get an inner life at all. And from what we understood, she kind of, for the most part, didn't want anything more to do with Spike until the very, very end. And so, like, I didn't care when she died, but Spike really cared. And I think that kind of shot the ending in the leg for me a little bit.
Yeah, like that's the thing. Like, I was much more invested in, you know, Spike's goodbyes with Jet and Faye than with the actual resolution, because, like, as soon as you kind of get the gist of what's going on, it's like, oh, he and Vicious are going to kill each other. Like, that's, of course they are. Like, that's just how this goes.
Did love that fight though.
It was a great fight, right? I loved, especially at the very end, where, like, they both have each other's weapon, and Spike's like, I'm not gonna kill you with a fucking sword. He slides the sword back to Vicious. He's like, yeah, whatever. And, you know, Spike shoots Vicious to death, and then Vicious, like, slashes him with a sword, which is, like, complete bullshit, because, like, of course that's not how anything works, but it's very anime, and I loved it, and it was great.
Yeah, I mean, like, all the fights prior, right, and, like, there's a lot of emphasis on Spike being fluid and using other people's force against them, and generally not a lot of blood in this show. Like, it's pretty bloodless for what it is, but just that last fight with them, like, just tearing into each other was so visceral. It was such a contrast. I felt so desperate. It was so good. But going from what didn't work for us in Julia, I want to talk about my favorite episode, which is the episode with VT in it. How did you feel about the Heavy Metal Queen?
That was a very interesting episode, right? For the audience, this is just an episode where there's this trucker. We're introduced to this space trucker who nobody can guess what the VT means in her name, and like whenever everybody comes up to her and tries to guess, they have to pay her like $1 essentially, and like she has this big stack of dollar bills that she just keeps with her, which is very fun. And she's like, whoever can guess my name will get this big stack. But like, yeah, VT, it's very interesting to see, like, yeah, there's a bunch of space people who just have to like do logistics, and that's what VT does is just drives this enormous spaceship around, and it goes into some places. God, it also has probably the best line in this show, which is, "I got a thing for eels."
I got a thing for eels, because they're chasing a dude with a dragon tattoo, and Faye just sees a little bit of this tattoo, and she literally tears the dude's shirt open when she figures out he's the wrong guy, and it's just this eel with heart eyes, and it's the
It's so good.
This is all, by the way, happening in a Chuck E. Cheese.
Yes, also.
But the reason I want to bring the VT episode up is because, first of all, the world building in the show is really great, right? It's a lot of passive world building. You get a lot of like clues into this like messy, kind of gritty space fantasy, right? Like Earth, like people expanded too quickly and it's all a mess. The interior cabins of these trucks are so fucking good. Just like, there's a point at which VT is like, hey, I'm looking for a truck with an Asian goddess painted on the side of it because they fucked over my friends. And this happens to also be the bounty that, this is the dragon tattoo guy.
Yes.
It's the bounty that the Bebops are chasing. But you get this, like, she sends out this clarion call of like, hey, I'm hunting this guy. And you get to see like 5 different truckers' cabins. One dude has like AK-47 ammo and has like built a jungle inside of his cabin, and there's a bunch of other ones that they're just so busy, and it's a throwaway background. You're never going to see the insides of these truck cabins again, but they're so detailed. And just like the world building in this is so like, it just feels lived in, right? And like, it's kind of the same stuff we were talking about like on the Bebop, is like the Bebop's falling apart. And it's just like messy fridges and broken pieces, and Jet's constantly having to fix the shower. And like, how did you feel about the like, because we go to a couple of different planets, and I won't say they're all that distinct necessarily, but like, I don't know, like I feel like we're exposed to so many space fantasies. Like, did anything stand out to you in terms of this one? I mean,
like you said, I don't know that any of the planets were like especially interesting. Like I think, to reference some of our episodes, like Jupiter Ascending had much more visually distinct style, like planet to planet. But I do think that, like, you're right, the world building and character of each setting came out, like, when they meet Ed, right? Ed is on Earth, and Earth is just like a blasted wasteland because of, climate change, presumably. And then like when they go to Ganymede, right, it's you can see that it's just like an old, worn out town, and like part of that is just the noir genre being like, okay, yeah, we have to go to like a wasteland, or like the Western genre also it draws from, or like we have to go to an old city where nobody goes here anymore. Yeah, I think the world building's pretty good.
Great. Yeah, I mean, like, I just like the fact that like there's spaceship gas stations. You always hear about, like, oh, we gotta go fuel up the ship, but you never, like, go to the gas station with it. Like, Spike has a whole confrontation in a spaceship gas station. There's, like, pet shops and street vendors, and, like, people look like people we see today, and there's, like, a level of grit and grime everywhere. Like, it's not tidy, it's not afraid of being kind of gross, and I don't know, there's just something so appealing about that to me. Like, I think part of being a tonal piece is just, like, the care they put in. I think also, like, There's something I learned recently, which is that a lot of old games specifically relied on the fuzziness of CRT TVs to look a certain way, but, like, you can even see that in, like, the beginning training montage with Spike. Spike's in the dark so often, and it's, like, so hard to see on an LED monitor, but then thinking about how much care was put into that so that the CRT TV made him look like he was glowing. I don't know, there was so much craftsmanship put into this show. It was just, like, so cool. So much care had to be put into the fight scenes, planning the layouts, making sure their backgrounds were big enough, and into the camera angles. And I don't know, it's just, like, yeah, the story kind of lost me a couple of times. Like, especially on my third watch, I was like, oh, I remember this dragging. But I don't know, it's so well crafted and such an art piece that, like, and not in, like, an overly pretentious way. I don't know, I just thought it was really neat. I really liked that part of it. But it's also funny that you bring up the you mentioned noirs and westerns, because, like, specifically Japan, like, the samurai genre is very influenced by westerns and vice versa.
Yes.
So if we're going to talk about genres, like, what's your experience with noirs?
That's the thing. Like, I don't know why I know shit about noir. Like, all my experience of the noir genre is largely parody, right? Like, I mean, I think we've all seen various TV shows or video games where it's just like, oh yeah, there's a hard-boiled detective, and, you know, I guess, like, this probably, I'm thinking SpongeBob for some reason, but I'm sure there's probably, like, a SpongeBob episode where, you know, like, SpongeBob is pretending to be a detective, and, like, somebody walks into his office, and, you know, like, all the shades are drawn, and you know, there's like, he's, like, smoking a cigarette, but it turns out it's, like, a fucking, I don't know, like a shell or some bullshit. But, like,
isn't there literally a character called the hash slinging slasher? Is that SpongeBob? Am I getting there?
Yes,
right?
That's SpongeBob. That's more like creepypasta, I want to say.
I guess so.
Right. I feel like noir is more like Dick Tracy, like,
yeah,
you know, like detective stuff, or like much more pulpy. But yeah, I just, that's the thing. I don't know that I have, like, the reference points that are necessary to appreciate where Bebop is coming from, just because, like, I don't have that firsthand experience. Like, I've never seen fucking Maltese Falcon, or let me look up the Wikipedia for noir.
It's very indicative of your experience level.
Yes, like, I just like, I can read out a bunch of lists of, like, noir film titles, and you could be like, oh, that's of course a noir film, like something called, like, The Lady from Shanghai, or, you know, The Sweet Smell of Success. Right, that sounds like a noir movie. I don't think I'll ever watch any of those films, but, like, even the title alone, you sort of get it. Like, there's a gritty, you know, like dark street with, like, a single street light on, somebody with in a trench coat smoking a cigarette, like, aesthetic to all of them that you sort of, like, that we've just sort of culturally osmosed, and, like, we are so far removed from that era that, it only shows up in parody anymore. And, like, that's why I don't know that I'm really equipped to talk about Bebop.
Yeah, I mean, like, I poke fun at the fact that you can't name noir, but, like, neither can I. I really, like, also don't have any experience in this genre at all. I've seen some, you know, black and white movies, but not a noir I can remember, you know what I mean? Which is funny, because as a person who, like, artistically really loves melodrama and dramatic lighting and, you know, like, cool angles and the aesthetic of, like, smoking a cigarette in a trench coat, like, that's all my shit. But yeah, I really don't have any experience with the genre either, which is, I remember there's this title card in one of the episodes that made me laugh that was like, a work which will be a genre unto its own, Cowboy Bebop. I was like, okay, hubris, love to see it.
It's really weird.
I mean, listen, boldly go forth, you know, stake your claim. But I think, even though it is a bold presumption to just, like, put on a title card, I do think that it is, like, I haven't seen anything like it, you know, until probably Samurai Champloo, which is, I don't know if you've seen, but also just, like, a very hip-hop, Western-influenced samurai story with the same fuzzy-haired, melancholic protagonist, and, you know, there's a girl chasing this samurai who smells like sunflowers. Like, it's all very nebulous. But I did, you know, I cannot remember what this was about, but someone was talking about a work that I think it was a film that felt more like poetry than prose. I can't remember what I was listening to and what that was about, but that's what it felt like Cowboy Bebop was. It was like trying to be a poem more than like a cohesive narrative. And, you know, I think it really wove some genres together really successfully. It was like a Western noir tragedy, and like, when was the last time we've seen something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned this on previous episodes, but like I am getting very worried that like we are entering an era of perpetual nostalgia where we just continue to remake things and redo old things in the past because like it's proven to be marketable, and like it is concerning that we haven't seen, you know, something weird and new in a while. And I mean, that's not to say that Cowboy Bebop is wholly weird and new. You know, nothing in culture is created in a vacuum. But like, yeah, like looking at this, like I'm glad Cowboy Bebop exists and has inspired so many millions of people. And, you know, I just hope that we can get more things like it that are weird and experimental and try to mash up genres.
Yeah, which, funny that you bring that up.
Because, unfortunately, there's gonna be a new Cowboy Bebop in November.
Yes.
Maybe not unfortunately. I don't know. Maybe it'll turn out great.
Honestly, I'm kind of jazzed because, jazzed, get it? The real footballers. Doing a lot of singing in this episode. I can't read the phrase "the real folk blues" without wanting to sing it. Like that song is earwormed. But the reason I'm kind of excited about this live action is because, first of all, speaking of the music, Yoko Kanno, my queen, is coming back. Yoko Kanno soundtracked my whole fucking childhood. Wolf's Rain, Artanelico, wherever you look, Yoko Kanno is soundtracking it. All that, like, wafty, like, I just remember Spike falling out a church window for 20 minutes, and there was just this, like, floaty, wafty choral piece happening in the background. I'm like, yes, Yoko Kanno! I'm so excited for her to come back. But I'm also excited because, I don't know if you saw in my notes, but the quote-unquote writer on Cowboy Bebop is a pseudonym for the collective Sunrise staff. And they have expressed a desire to write a couple episodes on the live action, which I think is really cool. So, you know, we hear a lot of stuff about like the live action Avatar, which is also coming to Netflix, and how like Mike and Brian have quit that production due to creative differences, and there's so much turmoil over there, you know. But who knows how that's going to turn out. But then you have the original creators of Bebop being like, no, we want to fuck around with John Cho for a while, you know. And I think the like costumes look really great, and it just, I don't know, I'm excited. I think it'll be cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll probably, even if we don't cover it on the show, we'll probably independently revisit it, because I do want to see how it stacks up and how maybe they've perhaps modernized this show and made it maybe more linear and maybe more appealing for me personally. But you know, we'll see. Who knows? I suspect they might make a change like that, because the media that I consume is much more indicative of the market that we currently exist in. So we'll see. Maybe
we'll cover it in our newsletter, which is coming out this week. You should register for it in our show notes, because we are introducing a bit of a second chance theater, where we tell you a take we forgot to record. We have bonus takes now in the newsletter, so you should sign up for it. It comes out once a month, and yeah, it's good stuff. So maybe we'll write about it on there, but you should sign up for that. Yeah, I mean, I'm quite jazzed for it. Yeah, I'll definitely watch it. I mean, like, listen, we've covered this on this program before. I'm a connoisseur of shit. I love just garbage. And that has taken me down the paths of, I've seen every live action adaptation of Death Note. All of them. I've seen them all. 2 Japanese, 1 American. I've done it. We're working on the musical. We are. Listen, Bleach, I'm coming for you. Fullmetal Alchemist, been there. So, like, my bar is so low that just the casting of John Cho has crossed.
Listen, by all accounts, it's expected to be good. I'm eager to see what they turn out. But well, Leyla, when we are not torturing each other with the threats of having to watch more live action anime stuff, where can people find you on the internet?
I'm at LEYLSES on Twitter and Tumblr. I am almost done with my contract, which does mean I will probably draw again. So if you're interested in this, might be a good time to check it out. Aaron, what about you?
You can find me on the internet at AaronSXL, where I write and I talk about healthcare and TTRPGs. So if that's interesting to you, check me out there. You can listen to the other podcast I do at The Bible Boys. Me and Michael and Joshua just recorded an episode about the Sleepy Time Tea founder's weird cult beliefs. He believes that all people used to be divided into like 7 rainbow races. It's super racist and fucked up. I will continue to drink Sleepy Time tea, but with an asterisk from now on. So if you're interested in that shit, check it out. It's a buck wild one. Our theme song is Obsolete by Keshko from the album Filmmakers Reference Kit Volume 2. You can find more of their music at keshko.bandcamp.com. Leyla, as we drift off into that good night, playing our own blues music, what do we say to our audience?
See you later, Space Cowboy.